For 3 years, the USGA and R&A insisted the rollback was final. Distance was ruining course architecture. Shot making was disappearing, and doing nothing was not an option. But on June 17, 2026, everything changed. The USGA and R&A, the two most powerful governing bodies in golf, admitted they had been wrong. In a joint statement with the PGA Tour and DP World Tour, they announced they were delaying the golf ball rollback. The implementation date was pushed from 2028 to 2030. But that wasn't the real story. The real story was the admission that the tours were questioning whether the rollback would even work. And at the center of the chaos, PGA Tour CEO Brian Rolapp, the man who has turned the golf world upside down. The Memorial Tournament in June 2026 was supposed to be about Jack Nicklaus hosting the best players in the world. Instead, it became the battleground for the biggest power struggle in golf history. In the room were the game's most powerful figures: Masters Chairman Fred Ridley, PGA Tour CEO Brian Rolapp, Commissioner Jay Monahan, PGA of America CEO Terry Clark, LPGA Commissioner Craig Kessler, and USGA board member Andy North. The topic? The golf ball rollback. And the mood was tense. The governing bodies had spent years insisting the rollback was the only solution to the distance problem. They had conducted exhaustive studies. They had consulted stakeholders. They had announced the change in December 2023. But when they presented their plan to the players, the reaction was brutal. Maverick McNeely, a player director on the tour policy board, spoke for many when he said, "We made it very clear that we don't want runaway distance. That's not good for the game, not good for the tour. Our stance was we didn't like the USGA and R&A coming to us and saying, 'Hey, there's a problem, here's your solution.'" The meeting was a turning point. For the first time, the players had a voice, and they were using it. The backlash from players was fierce and unapologetic. Justin Thomas, a member of the Player Advisory Council and a Titlice staffer, didn't hold back. "I feel a majority of guys out here are under the same opinion I am that there isn't a problem with the golf ball. So, if that's the case, I don't know why we'd let a group of amateur golfers decide how we play the game." Harris English, the 14-year veteran who has seen the tour evolve through multiple eras, echoed those concerns. The concern of English, McNeely, Ricky Fowler, Jordan Spieth, and others is that the rule change, as proposed, will create winners and losers. It will affect certain ball flights more than others, and potentially give an advantage to players able to create higher ball speeds. Jordan Spieth, the three-time major winner, made the most compelling argument. They should be finding a way for it to be the same for everybody. Some players will be affected 2 yards and others 20. I hit titliced rollback prototypes one time straight into the wind, and I hit a couple that were the same ball speed, hit a little different on the face, and the difference in carry was crazy. The dispersion was massive. Spieth's point was devastating. The rollback wasn't just about reducing distance. It was about unfairly punishing certain players while leaving others untouched. The rule was flawed, and the players knew it. Even golf's two biggest supporters of slowing the ball down started questioning the plan changes. Rory McIlroy has supported a rollback since the USGA and R&A first floated it, arguing it will restore skills the power game buried. However, when he tested the new rollback ball himself, he wasn't so convinced. In an interview with the Friday Golf Podcast, he said that the differences were so marginal that it's not going to make a difference. The debate reached a fever pitch when it was revealed that Cameron Young had been playing a prototype ball that conformed to the new rollback standards. The results were devastating for the governing bodies. Young told reporters that he hit a prototype roughly 2 years ago at Titlice Manchester Lane testing facility. He didn't know what it was, and he asked because he liked the flight. "This ball is easier to control with the irons," Young said. "It doesn't spin as much, and it just allows me to be better with my distance control just because it's more consistent. The governing bodies projected a 13 to 15-yard reduction for elite players under the new conditions. Young's drop was closer to 1 yard. At this year's The Players' Championship in March 2026, he hit the longest recorded drive in the ShotLink era, 375 yards. And he did it with a golf ball specifically designed to make feats like that more difficult. The math behind the golf rollback plan grew tangled before June 17th, and the PGA Tour quietly sharpened the tension. In May, it sent a 13-question survey to PGA and Korn Ferry Tour players, asking whether the tour should govern its own equipment rules instead of sticking with the USGA and R&A. This was not a routine check-in. The tour was gauging whether to leave a century-old shared rulebook. That question now reshapes how the rollback moves forward. On June 17, 2026, the USGA and R&A issued a joint statement that stunned the golf world. They announced they were abandoning the staggered rollback plan. There would be no rollback in 2028. Instead, there would be a unified date of 2030. But the timeline change wasn't the real story. The real story was the admission that the tours were questioning whether the rollback would even work. The statement revealed 3 key outcomes. Recognition that distance continues to increase at the elite level. A concern by the tours that the updated ODS testing approach may not achieve the desired results. A collective willingness to reconsider alternative approaches that may more materially impact the pace of future distance increases, while minimizing disruption to the overall golf market. The governing bodies had blinked. They had admitted that the rollback might not work, and they were willing to reconsider everything. Mike Wan, the USGA CEO, tried to put a positive spin on the decision. He described the 2030 change as a small, digestible bite that the industry can handle. But critics weren't buying it. It's true, but only because no one chokes on cotton candy, wrote Eamon Lynch of Golfweek. The specifications being introduced for balls are utterly ineffective and don't constitute even a pause, much less a rollback. While the USGA and R&A were backing down, Brian Rolapp was making his move. On June 23, 2026, he held a press conference ahead of the Travelers' Championship and dropped a bombshell. Rolapp announced the tour's plans to reorganize into 2 divisions starting in 2028. Track 1, called the Championship Series, would feature 23-24 events offering purses of $20 million and fields of 120 players. Track 2, the Challenger Series, would consist of 20 events with purses of $4 million. The top 90 on the season-long points list would keep their status for the following season, while 20 players would be promoted from Track 2. The Tour Championship would shift to match play at rotating venues. Sponsor exemptions would be eliminated. But the real bombshell came when Golfweek asked about the USGA and R&A's announcement. I think we had a really good meeting at the memorial with the R&A, USGA Rolapp said. I think they have a profound responsibility for the rules of the game, for amateurs and professionals. And I think they heard our point of view, and they heard, more importantly, the point of view of our members, which resulted in the announcement last week, which I think is really helpful. When asked specifically whether ideas, such as a model local rule, bifurcation, or different equipment standards for PGA Tour players and recreational golfers could now be part of the discussion, Rolapp did not endorse any specific solution. But he did not shut the door either. I think dialogue is always really productive and beneficial, Rolapp said, especially for rules that are going to impact people who are playing the game. So, I think that's always good. I think everything is on the table. In golf's distance debate, that is not a throwaway line. That is the sentence that makes everyone sit up a little straighter. It does not mean the PGA Tour is supporting bifurcation. It does not mean the rollback is going away. But it does mean the conversation about distance has changed. Behind the scenes, the USGA was facing a nightmare scenario that no one had anticipated. Equipment companies were threatening to challenge the golf ball rollback in court. The litigation would drag on, loud and ugly, while OEMs quietly redirected R&D investment and began marketing around the uncertainty. The PGA Tour, whose membership was already hostile to the rollback and whose players were sponsored by the very brands filing those legal challenges, floated what had already been circulating in tour circles. Why not establish our own rules? LIV Golf would seize the opening it has been waiting for, marketing itself as the tour that plays the ball the governing bodies don't want you to play. Club professionals at 14,000 facilities across the United States would stop trying. And then there was the President of the United States. Donald Trump has been a vocal opponent of the rollback. In June 2026, he posted on Truth Social congratulating PGA Tour Commissioner Brian Rolapp for a big victory where the USGA wanted to roll back the distance of a golf ball for whatever reason, and now they are precluded from doing so, at least for a long number of years. The USGA had the R&A, Augusta National, and jurisdiction over the amateur game. But sustained resistance from that many directions would eventually make irrelevant everything the USGA does. Reopening this dialogue wasn't just pragmatic, but an act of self-preservation. Now, for the first time, the full picture of Brian Rolapp's power play has been revealed, and it's not what anyone expected. Rolapp's comments are noteworthy because the PGA Tour is no longer simply being asked to react to a rule imposed by the USGA and R&A. The Tour, its Player Advisory Council, and its members are now part of the process in a more public and apparently more meaningful way. There could still be a golf ball rollback in 2030, but maybe there will be a model local rule for elite competitions instead. Other equipment changes that once were locked in the attic with the balata balls and square drivers might be considered again. Rolapp said everything is on the table, and when it comes to distance, that could literally mean anything, including ideas that we thought were left for dead. The governing bodies are willing to reconsider whether there is a better way. A simpler, more narrow solution is exactly what we're going to spend time looking at. Once said at Shinnecock Hills. I think the alternative to what's on the table for 2030, things that we're going to look at together as a group, are simpler, more narrow solutions. A simpler, more narrow solution sounds a lot like something aimed exclusively at elite competitions rather than recreational golfers. The USGA and R&A are in panic. Brian Rolapp's surprise rules announcement has sent shockwaves across golf. The governing bodies have been forced to back down. The players have been emboldened, and the future of the sport is more uncertain than ever. The questions now are impossible to ignore. Will the PGA Tour break away from the USGA and R&A and create its own rules? Will the rollback ever happen, or will it be abandoned entirely? And what does the future hold for the sport when its most powerful figures can't agree on anything? The collapse of the rollback is a stunning victory for the players, but it is also a reminder that the sport is more divided than ever. The governing bodies have lost their authority. The tours have gained power, and the distance debate is far from over.